Hey guys! Tonight we slip into a story that's older than your great dash times dash a dash thousand grandparents. You're lying there, maybe under a blanket, maybe staring at the ceiling fan, while somewhere in the imagination a fire crackles on a mountain where gods whisper, plot, and complain about their headaches. It's the story of Athena's birth, but don't panic. You probably won't survive this myth if you try to fact-check every detail. The Greeks didn't exactly have a department of accuracy, so their tales wander like goats on a hillside. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you want to play along, drop your location and local time in the comments, like 2:37 a.m. in Manila or sunset in Barcelona. It's fun to see how scattered we all are across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're sitting before a hearth, the stones warm under your palms, while smoke drifts upward like lazy handwriting against the rafters. The Olympian gods aren't quite gathered yet. This is before the familiar pantheon comes into its full form, but you can already sense them. Zeus hasn't taken charge. Cronus, his dad, is still stomping around in paranoid glory. The world feels raw, half-finished, like someone just unpacked it from a cosmic flat-pack box and forgot to tighten the screws. The Greeks believed stories like this weren't just bedtime entertainment. They were explanations for why the world feels unstable. Earthquakes, that's gods arguing. A headache? Maybe you swallowed your girlfriend. Yes, we're heading there eventually. For now, you're just trying to warm your toes at the hearth while history or mythology, depending on how strict you are, gets rolling. The hearth is central in Greek culture. Every household kept a fire, tended by women who whispered to Hestia, goddess of the hearth, hoping flames would never flicker out. Archaeologists actually dig up blackened hearths in ancient ruins, proof that even in the Bronze Age, people sat where you are now, hands outstretched, murmuring tales of gods who mirrored their own family dramas. It's funny how something so ordinary, keeping a fire alive, became sacred enough to link mortals with immortals. You lean closer to that imagined fire and hear the low murmur of voices. Gaia, the earth herself, has been whispering, warning about dangers to come. She's like that relative who insists, "Don't eat that, it'll give you heartburn." Except she's talking about prophecies of children overthrowing parents. You nod politely, because who's going to argue with the literal embodiment of the planet? The mood around Olympus is restless. The gods don't quite live in shining palaces, yet they're more like scattered energy, swirling forces waiting for shape. You picture it like backstage before a school play, costumes half-stitched, actors mumbling lines, a director somewhere tearing their hair out. That's the cosmos right now, and you're the audience member who arrived early, sitting in the dark, watching as the set slowly lights up. Historical fact break: ancient Greeks didn't think of their myths as strictly fictional. They blurred the lines between memory, history, and divine gossip. Herodotus, sometimes called the father of history, tossed mythic tales right beside troop numbers as if they carried the same weight. Scholars today still debate whether he was gullible or just knew his audience loved a good yarn. Quirky tidbit: in some early Greek towns, people used to smudge hearth ashes on their babies' foreheads for protection, basically giving them an ashy superhero mask. You wonder if it worked or just made bath time awkward. And here's the scholarly debate for tonight's drift. Historians still argue whether the story of Athena's birth was an older pre-Greek myth, absorbed into Hellenic culture, or if it was a homegrown invention by storytellers who wanted to dramatize Zeus's ego. It's the kind of question that fills academic journals, but doesn't really help you get to sleep. For you, the fire crackles and the whispers grow louder. You feel the narrative tugging, drawing you toward the darker corners of this hearth hall. Cronus is pacing there, his shadow stretched against the stone. Rhea hovers nearby, her face lined with worry. Somewhere far off, a baby cries fate, already stirring. You're still safe, still warm, but you can sense the myth opening up like a door into a storm. And with a yawn, you realize tonight isn't just about one goddess being born. It's about families who eat each other, lovers who turn into problems, and a world that never seems quite steady underfoot. Lucky you get the deluxe front row seat without any of the divine indigestion. Gaia's whisper drifts to you like a breeze that curls around your ears. Even though no one is standing there, you hear her, not in words exactly, but in a rumbling tone like shifting rocks under the earth. She is the ground beneath your toes, the soil that smells faintly damp, the weight that keeps mountains where they belong. And she has a warning. She always has a warning. The story lulls you forward. Cronus, the titan currently perched on the throne of the cosmos, is not exactly known for his parenting style. He came to power by overthrowing his own father, Uranus. You picture it like a messy family soap opera that spans generations, except the set pieces of stars and oceans. Gaia, as mother of all, watched this coup and sighed because, deep down, she knew that what goes around comes around. Her whisper reaches Cronus one day. A child of yours will rise against you, just as you rose against your father. That's the prophecy. You imagine being told by the earth itself that your kid will grow up, to knock you off your cosmic throne. Not exactly the kind of thing that makes you rush to Toys R Us. You can almost see Cronus stiffen, a shiver running through him that no robe of gold can hide. He clutches at his crown. Maybe it feels suddenly too heavy, like a bucket of lead balanced on his brow. He doesn't laugh, doesn't scoff, because Cronus knows Gaia doesn't exaggerate. Her words carry the weight of tectonic plates. Historical fact slides in throughout Greek culture. Oracles and prophecies were treated with deadly seriousness. People trekked miles to Delphi, waiting in line like fans at a concert, just to hear a priestess mumble something cryptic after inhaling vapors. Rulers and generals made life-or-death choices based on those riddles. So, when Gaia mutters, Cronus listens. Quirky tidbit while you yawn. Ancient Greeks used to think earthquakes were Gaia literally shifting, in her sleep, rolling over in bed. It's oddly comforting, imagining the planet as a cranky mother who just can't get comfortable on her mattress of magma. But scholars still argue whether Gaia's warnings in these myths are meant as actual divine predictions or as narrative excuses. Was she genuinely omniscient? Or did poets just slip her in whenever they needed someone to announce, UHO, trouble ahead? The debate hums on in dusty university corridors while you sit cross-legged in this myth. Letting her whisper ripple around you, you notice how the guards, half-formed and restless, grow tense when Gaia speaks. Even Rhea, Cronus's wife, lowers her eyes. The warning hangs heavy, thicker than smoke from your imagined hearth. You picture Cronus pacing, muttering to himself, eyes darting like a man who just Googled his own symptoms and is convinced the worst is coming. The whisper doesn't fade. It coils around Cronus into his dreams, into the marrow of his bones. And as you shift under your blanket, you realize that this is the seed of Athena's story. A single warning, one sentence from Gaia sets off the chain of paranoia, violence, and strangely creativity that will eventually lead to a goddess of wisdom, stepping out of someone's forehead like a surprise theater act. For now, though, Cronus clutches the prophecy like a thorn he can't pull out. You can almost hear him grinding his teeth in the silence, wondering what to do, how to dodge fate, and maybe plotting something that feels clever in the moment but will haunt him later. Classic Cronus, the fire flickers, your eyelids heavy, and the whisper of Gaia seems to fade into the sound of your own breathing. Yet you know it's still there, tucked under the earth, waiting. Cronus's eyes glint in the firelight, and his jaw tightens as if every tooth wants to grind the prophecy into dust. You sit with him in this dim hall of imagination, watching a titan try to outwit destiny. He knows the story of his own life too well. He rose to power by betraying Uranus, his father. He struck with a sickle of flint, guided by Gaia, and from that bloody act came his throne. But Gaia had whispered then too, hadn't she? She always whispers, and she's rarely wrong. So Cronus decides, if the threat comes from children, then children must never live long enough to rise against him. His solution is brutal and weirdly practical. Each time Rhea bears him a child, Cronus swallows it whole. No hesitation, no remorse, just open mouth, gulp, gone. You can picture it with a grim little chuckle, a titan treating his own kids like snack-sized hors d'oeuvres. Historians still argue whether these tales were meant as serious reflections of ritual fears like societies that buried newborns to appease God's awe, whether it was mythic exaggeration to warn about tyrannical fathers. Either way, it makes for one of the darkest dinner table images in all mythology. Imagine Rhea holding a tiny infant, still wet with the smell of birth, only to watch Cronus reach down with hands big as boulders. You hear the baby's cry cut short, the silence afterward more painful than the act itself. The swallowed children don't die, though not yet. In some versions, they just live cramped inside their father's belly, waiting like stowaways in a cave. That's almost worse, isn't it? Like a nightmarish game of hide and seek that never ends. Historical fact. Art from ancient Greece often painted Cronus, sometimes called Saturn, by the Romans devouring his children. The most famous image comes centuries later from the Spanish painter Goya, who captured the horror with wild eyes and dripping jaws. Even though it's post-classical, that painting sticks to the idea that Cronus was never just a wise old king. He was hunger itself. And here's a quirky tidbit for you to smirk at while trying to stay sleepy. Some small villages in Greece used to tell children, "Eat quickly or Cronus will come and eat you." It's basically the ancient version of "finish your broccoli or the bogeyman gets you." Parenting hacks haven't really improved. In 3,000 years, you see Rhea shrinking back in despair. Each child lost, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, all swallowed before they can breathe properly. The world grows lonelier with each gulp. Rhea feels powerless, like a woman married to a storm she can't escape. She presses her forehead against Gaia's soil, begging for help, and the Earth Mother whispers again, low and steady, "There will be one child, one who changes it all." Your own eyelids flutter at that, because the rhythm of prophecy is like a lullaby. It repeats, repeats destiny echoing across generations. Scholars still argue whether the myth of Cronus eating his kids was originally tied to seasonal cycles, seeds buried, swallowed by Earth, only to sprout again. Maybe it wasn't just a horror story, but a farming metaphor gone wild. Still, you can't help but notice the shiver in your shoulders as you picture the Titan's throat working. Another god pushed down into his gut. Cronus thinks he's clever, that he's blocked fate by swallowing life before it can bloom. But you know better. Sitting here in the smoky half-light, you can feel the story stretching forward, waiting for the child he can't control, the trick he won't see coming, and you, tucked in with your pillow, can almost hear those muffled voices inside Cronus's belly. They're not gone. They're waiting. Rhea sits alone after yet another birth, her arms suddenly empty. The echo of her baby's cry still lingering in the air. You can almost feel her heart aching like a bruise under her ribs. Each time she brings a child into the world, Cronus swoops in, his shadow long and merciless, and swallows the infant whole. It's a routine now, one that gnaws at her soul. She feels like little more than a conveyor belt of children doomed to vanish. Before they've even touched sunlight, you lean closer to her grief. The firelight in your imagined hearth flickers across her face, and for the first time, you see defiance forming in her eyes. Rhea has had enough. She may not be as strong as Cronus, but desperation sharpens into cunning. She presses her palms against the earth, begging her mother Gaia for guidance, and the whisper that rises through the soil is clear. Hide this one. Trick him. Let hope grow where despair has lived. The stage is set. Rhea's next child, Destiny's child, if you will, cannot be surrendered. She gives birth on a hidden mountainside in Crete, the air sharp with pine and salt. The cries of the newborn pierce the night, and she wraps him tightly, swaddling not only his tiny body, but also the fragile flame of a future she dares to protect. She names him Zeus. Here's where the cleverness comes in. When Cronus demands his usual snack, Rhea presents him not with her son, but with a rock, wrapped snugly in cloth. Imagine it. Cronus doesn't even glance closely. He just opens his vast mouth and swallows the bundle whole. The rock clunks down into his stomach, heavy and unyielding, while Zeus is spirited away to safety. Historical fact. In Greek sanctuaries, people sometimes worshipped a stone called the asterisk, said to be the very rock Cronus swallowed. It became a sacred symbol, proof of divine trickery and survival. Pilgrims touched it, kissed it, and even poured oil over it in reverence. A literal rock once played the role of baby substitute in a myth, and people later treated it as holy. Quirky tidbit: some ancient storytellers claimed Cronus didn't notice the difference. Because gods don't chew, they just swallow like pelicans, one gulp, and down it goes. Which means Cronus had the digestion of a cement mixer, and the observational skills of a distracted teenager. Historians still argue whether Rhea's trick was a metaphor for human rituals. Was it a coded memory of sacrificing objects instead of real children? A relief for early societies trying to move away from dark traditions? Or was it just a storyteller's way to make Cronus look foolish? Either way, the stone becomes one of mythology's strangest baby swaps. You lean back and picture the scene into halves. On one side, Cronus lumbers away, smug and bloated, thinking he's beaten fate yet again. On the other, a mountain cave cradles Zeus, his tiny breaths fogging the air. Nymphs whispering lullabies, goats giving their milk, bees buzzing with golden honey. Destiny has slipped out from under Cronus's nose. The fire in your mind's hearth sputters softly, sparks leaping like stars. You realize this moment is the hinge of everything to come. One stone, one trick, one desperate mother. The gods trapped in Cronus's belly don't know it yet, but rescue is stirring on the wind. And you, tucked into your pillow, can almost hear the faint clink of that swallowed rock settling at the bottom of Cronus's gut proof that sometimes the universe's grandest rebellions start with a mother's quiet deception. You follow the trail of wind down the rocky paths of Crete, where the salty sea air mixes with the resin of pines and the musk of goats. Somewhere in a hidden cave, Rhea has left her infant son, Zeus, surrounded by guardians who will raise him beyond the reach of Cronus's suspicion. You crouch at the cave mouth, the night crisp, and listen to the faintest cries bouncing off stone walls like tiny echoes of thunder inside. The baby isn't alone. Nymphs gather around him, those timeless caretakers of springs and forests. Their laughter is soft and musical, a counterpoint to his fussing. They feed him with drops of honey, thick and golden, gathered from hives clinging to the rocks. They wash him in cool spring water, their voices weaving lullabies that mingle with the cave's own hum. It feels more like a secret concert than childcare. And then there's Amalthea the goat who nurses the child of prophecy. You blink at the oddity. Yes, the king of the gods, future hurler of lightning bolts, is basically raised on goat's milk. You imagine Zeus tugging at Amalthea's side, his tiny fists clenched, while the goat stands patient, a little bewildered but gentle. This goat is so important that later myths say her horn was broken off and transformed into the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, symbol of endless food. You smile. A divine baby bottle turned into a magic abundance dispenser. Historical fact: Crete, where this myth is set, was the heart of the Minoan civilization long before the classical Greeks we usually think of. Archaeologists uncovered labyrinthine palaces, frescoes of dancers and bulls, and hints of goddess-centered worship. Some scholars think the story of Zeus growing up in Crete is a memory of those older cultural layers. Sneaking into Greek mythology, quirky tidbit, one version of the myth says that to keep Zeus's crying from reaching Cronus's ears, a band of armored youths called the Curetes would dance around the cave, clashing their spears on shields. Basically, the first ever heavy metal babysitters, and here's the scholarly debate you drift through. Historians still argue whether the myth of Zeus's secret upbringing was invented purely for drama, or if it preserved actual local cult traditions from Crete, where people really worshipped Zeus as a young god rather than the thunder-wielding patriarch he became elsewhere. You sit quietly in the cave watching this unlikely nursery. The flicker of oil lamps paints golden arcs on the walls, and the shadows of nymphs sway like tall grass in wind. Baby Zeus kicks, his laughter surprisingly loud for someone whose destiny is to dethrone a titan. You notice the comfort here, the contrast between Cronus's cold, paranoid halls and this earthy refuge of honey, milk and song. It's strange, isn't it? The mightiest gods, the ones sculpted in marble and feared across the seas, so often begin their lives like fragile secrets hidden, swaddled, and nursed by creatures who never get their names in history books. Zeus will thunder across Olympus one day, but tonight he's just a child clutching at goat fur. The smell of beeswax on his breath, the firelight in your imagination glows warmer now. You can almost taste the sweetness of honey, hear the distant clang of the Curetes' shields, and feel the cool breath of the Cretan cave. And you know that every moment here pushes the story closer to its reckoning. You step quietly from the cave of Crete, the scent of pine still clinging to your clothes, and drift forward in time. Zeus is no longer a wailing bundle of goat-fed energy. He's grown tall, broad-shouldered, eyes flickering with the kind of ambition that keeps lesser gods awake at night. He moves with the restlessness of someone who knows destiny is whispering just behind him, waiting for him to turn around and listen. Cronus, meanwhile, continues his paranoid reign. His belly is still full of swallowed children, his crown gleams heavy, and his suspicion leaks into every corner of the cosmos. Yet, he doesn't see Zeus coming. He thinks his trick with swallowing babies has sealed the prophecy shut forever. You almost want to chuckle. Cronus is like that person who locks their front door, but forgets the back gate is wide open. Zeus grows in secret, gathering not only strength but allies. You see him wandering mountains, rivers, and groves, where gods in hiding and primordial forces start to recognize something in him. The nymphs whisper, "This one is different." The Curetes beat their shields louder when he passes. Even mortals still vague and shadowy in these early myths feel a shiver when his footsteps stir the earth. Historical fact to anchor you. Greek culture valued the slow build of alliances. City-states like Athens and Sparta didn't just rush into war. They schemed, negotiated, and forged pacts. The myth of Zeus quietly recruiting allies mirrors this political reality, giving divine weight to the art of patience. Quirky tidbit, some storytellers claimed Zeus practiced disguises in these early days, turning into animals or clouds to test whether his supporters were loyal. Imagine bumping into a suspiciously charming goat on a hillside, and realizing later it was Zeus doing reconnaissance. And the scholarly debate for tonight's drifting thought. Historians still argue whether these tales of Zeus's secret plotting represent an actual memory of tribal revolts against older powers, or if poets simply loved the drama of a scrappy underdog building a team. Either way, the image sticks: Zeus walking under stars, collecting promises like fireflies in a jar. The rebellion isn't loud yet. It's brewing in whispers, in handshakes sealed under moonlight, in the quiet clang of weapons forged in hidden forges. Zeus knows he cannot rush. Cronus's paranoia is sharp, and the Titan still commands immense power. But destiny has patience, and so does the son who was once left crying in a cave. You close your eyes and picture it, a young god standing on a cliff, waves foaming below, the horizon stretching endless and silver. Behind him, the murmur of allies. Before him, the shadow of Cronus. The air smells like iron and salt, and in the silence you sense it to come before history tilts on its axis. The night is heavy with storm clouds when you follow Zeus back toward his father's domain. He no longer moves like a hidden child, but like a storm gathering momentum. His allies trail behind him, shadows in the half-light, waiting for the moment when everything locked away will burst free. Cronus, oblivious as ever, reclines on his throne, that swallowed rock from Rhea's trick clunking uncomfortably in his stomach. His paranoia keeps him pacing, but he believes his belly full of children means safety. You lean closer, knowing the irony is about to crack open. Zeus doesn't march in with brute force. Instead, he slips into the palace with a mixture of cunning and confidence. He offers Cronus a cup, its liquid shimmering faintly, depending on which storyteller you follow. This cup is laced with an emetic potion crafted by the goddess Metis. Or maybe it's just a strong drink that unsettles the Titan's gut. Either way, the result is the same. Cronus doubles over. His stomach churns like the sea in a storm. He retches, and with a sound you'd rather not imagine too vividly, out-tumble the children he swallowed long ago. One by one, they emerge: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon blinking in disbelief. Alive after years trapped in darkness. It's less a family reunion and more a jailbreak with a splash of parental revenge. Historical fact, the Greeks sometimes linked this myth to rituals of purification and renewal. Vomiting might sound grotesque, but in ancient medicine, purges were seen as ways to reset the body. Cronus's purge becomes cosmic, out with the old oppression, in with reborn possibility. Quirky tidbit: a later Roman retelling joked that Cronus had no idea he was carrying around adult gods inside him, like the world's worst surprise party. Imagine burping and accidentally releasing Hades, and here's the scholarly debate you drift through. Historians still argue whether this vomiting episode symbolizes seasonal rebirth seeds sprouting after being buried, or if it was a political metaphor about overthrown rulers coughing up what they stole. You watch the siblings embrace, stretching stiff limbs, voices rising in wonder. For the first time in ages, the children of Rhea stand free, no longer muffled inside Cronus's gut. Their eyes lock on Zeus, and they know who to thank. He isn't just the youngest anymore, he's the leader who cracked their prison. Cronus staggers, gasping, his power suddenly fragile. Around him, the hall tilts with the weight of what's been unleashed. You sit at the edge of your blanket, listening to the soft hum of your fan, and realize you're caught between breaths in that moment when tyranny starts to tremble. The gods are free, the balance is shifting, and Zeus's rebellion is no longer just whispers on the wind, it's a storm ready to break. The air splits open with the first clash, and suddenly you're not just sitting by a hearth or a cave, you're dropped into a battlefield that stretches wider than your dreams can hold. Titans on one side, Olympians on the other. The sky shivers, mountains groan, seas writhe like restless animals. This is the Titanomachy, the war of gods against their own parents, and you're floating right in the middle of it. Zeus leads his siblings with a calm determination, lightning beginning to crackle faintly in his hands, though the full force of that weapon isn't his yet. Beside him, Poseidon wields a trident that hums with sea salt energy, while Hades carries shadows like cloaks draped over his shoulders. The goddesses Hestia, Demeter, and Hera move in steady rhythm, their presence as necessary as fire, grain, and family. They aren't simply cheerleaders, they're forces of their own. On the opposite ridge, Cronus roars, and his Titan brothers lumber forward like earthquakes with legs. Their armor is stone, their weapons the sheer weight of mountain and ocean. You see rivers divert as they stomp, trees snap like twigs. The battlefield itself seems to quake with every step. Historical fact: Greek poets described the Titanomachy in almost cinematic terms. Hesiod's Theogony gives glimpses of the chaos, thunder, fire, earthquakes, and rivers boiling. It reads less like a neat chronicle and more like someone trying to capture what an apocalypse would look like through poetry. Quirky tidbit: later storytellers claimed Zeus had help from unlikely allies like the Hecaton Cheers, 100-handed giants who could hurl rocks faster than popcorn flying from a broken machine. You imagine them juggling boulders, flinging them in every direction. More chaotic than strategic, but devastating all the same. And the scholarly debate tonight, historians still argue whether the Titanomachy is a symbolic memory of actual human conflicts, tribal revolts, invasions, shifting powers, or simply a myth designed to dramatize the eternal clash between old order and new. You drift closer, watching sparks scatter like fireflies as weapons strike. The Curete's shields clang again, this time not to hide Zeus's cries, but to rally his army. Cronus hurls mountains, Zeus counters with storms. The air feels hot, metallic, heavy with ozone. Yet even in this chaos, the story has a strange calm undercurrent. You sense inevitability, as though the outcome is written in the soil. Cronus fights ferociously, but with each thunderbolt Zeus throws, the world begins to choose sides. Rivers swell to aid Poseidon. Shadows deepen for Hades. Even the earth quivers in sympathy with Gaia's whispers, as if she too prefers her grandchildren to rule. The battle rages not for hours or days, but for years, 10 years. The poets say, though you know mythic time is stretchy, like waiting in line at the DMV, a decade of storms, tremors, screams, and silence. And you, wrapped in a blanket, feel the weight of it pressing on your eyelids. The war stretching long enough to blur into dream dot, and then, somewhere at the edge of this thunderous decade, the tide turns. Zeus raises his hand, lightning arcs like a seam ripping across the sky, and Cronus stumbles. You can feel the balance shift, the old order cracking open. The Olympians are winning. Fate is moving forward and the prophecy is unfolding. The battlefield is still echoing with thunder when Zeus makes the call that tips everything. He has been patient, watching the ebb and surge of the titanomachi for years. But now he sees the stalemate. His lightning, mighty though it is, cannot topple Cronus and his siblings alone. The Titans are too immense, too entrenched in their elemental power. So, with a voice that cuts through the storm, Zeus turns downward to the very depths of Tartarus. You follow him in imagination, the ground opening like a trapdoor. Down, down, into the abyss where the 100-handed one's hecaton cheers have been chained. Giants with 50 heads and 100 arms apiece. They have been rotting in shadow, their chains clinking like muffled thunder. Most would pass them off as bedtime nightmare fodder. But Zeus sees weapons where others saw monsters. He frees them. You watch him snap their chains, and suddenly Tartarus trembles, not from fear, but anticipation. The giants rise, stretch all their hands at once, and the air fills with the whiplash crack of stone being lifted. Imagine one of them grabbing a hill, another scooping up a mountain, tossing them like dice on a table. No finesse, no subtlety, just overwhelming force. Historical fact. In Greek lore, the hecaton cheers were the ultimate reinforcements gifted to Zeus by Gaia's persuasion. Their names Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges echo like war chants through the poems. Hesiod describes them as so powerful that their very presence turned the tide of battle. Quirky tidbit, some fringe accounts say the 100-handed ones weren't just brute force. They were cosmic drummers, each hand capable of keeping a beat. You picture them thumping away, creating rhythms so loud they drown Titan war cries. It's basically a nightmare jam band with 100 percussionists and 0 volume control. The scholarly debate slides in here too. Historians still argue whether the myth of the hecaton cheers reflects ancient tribes with overwhelming manpower or whether the image of 100 hands is just a poetic exaggeration for impossible, unstoppable numbers. Either way, you're glad you don't have to count fingers in that family tree. Back on the battlefield, the effect is immediate. The hecaton cheers don't just throw rocks, they hurl entire landscapes. Valleys collapse. Peaks soar into the air only to come crashing down on Titan ranks. The Olympians, emboldened, press forward with their elemental weapons. Zeus with lightning, Poseidon with surging waves, Hades with shadows curling like serpents. And Cronus, for the first time, he falters. His scythe carves storms into the air, but each swing is blocked by a rain of boulders, each roar drowned out by thunder layered upon thunder. The Titan King begins to retreat, not in cowardice, but in the recognition that even his towering might cannot hold against this impossible army. You drift among the chaos, but the longer it lasts, the softer it seems. The crash of mountain upon mountain fades into something like distant surf. The thunder becomes a lullaby drumbeat. You feel the inevitability again, the old gods breaking under the weight of the new. And when the dust finally settles, you see Cronus and his Titan brothers captured, dragged, and bound. The 100-handed ones, once prisoners themselves, now stand as jailers, sealing the defeated Titans into Tartarus, far below where sunlight dares to reach. The war is over. The Olympians have won. And you? You're barely awake enough to notice that victory doesn't feel like celebration. It feels like the beginning of another storm. Silence falls where chaos once reigned. And it is a silence so thick you almost mistake it for calm. The battlefield is littered with fragments of mountains, seas reshaped by furious tides, and the very sky still flickers faintly from Zeus's thunder. But beneath that quiet hum, the world is waiting because the Titans may be gone. But Cronus's shadow hasn't vanished with them. Zeus stands at the heart of this quiet ruin, his siblings at his side. Victory should taste sweet, but it lingers bitter. You feel it with him, that half-suspected truth that wars rarely end when the last blow is struck. Cronus is chained in Tartarus, yes, but the prophecy of his downfall echoes louder than the chains themselves. What if the curse isn't finished? What if the cycle is only pausing? Historical fact. After the titanomachi, the Olympians weren't immediately secure. Greek storytellers hinted at unrest, challenges from new monsters, and even rebellions within their own ranks. Power in mythology is never static, it's more like juggling flaming swords on a trampoline. And here comes the quirky tidbit. Some fragments of myth suggest Cronus didn't simply vanish into Tartarus. Instead, he may have escaped to the Isles of the Blessed, living out a weird retirement as ruler of a golden paradise. Imagine your tyrant dad losing a war, then sneaking off to Florida for an eternal cruise package. Cozy, if awkward. Yet the scholarly debate is thornier. Historians still argue whether Cronus represents a dethroned chieftain, a fading agricultural god, or just a symbol of inevitable generational turnover. Whatever he is, the story keeps circling back to him even in defeat. He lingers like a stubborn echo. You drift closer to Zeus, watching him scan the horizon. He knows the future is fragile. He knows that victory is only Act 1, and Act 2 is already brewing inside his own head literally. For somewhere behind his brow, in a place mortals would call a migraine, Athena waits. You feel the tension sharpen. The gods disperse to claim their realms, Poseidon to the seas, Hades to the underworld, Demeter to the fields, Hera beside her brother in Olympus. Zeus alone feels the storm within. At first, it is subtle, a throb that hums behind his temples. He tries to ignore it. He is king now. He cannot falter. But each passing day, the ache grows sharper, pressing against his skull like an idea too big to remain unspoken. The world outside, meanwhile, begins to settle. Mortals, though not yet shaped into the humans you'd recognize, sense a shift. Rivers flow more steadily. The seasons start to whisper their rhythm. And yet, beneath the new order, Cronus's laughter flickers faintly. Carried on the wind like static you can't quite tune out, Zeus touches his forehead, lightning flashing behind his eyes. You lean closer, almost feeling the pulse of something ancient and restless beneath his skin. This is no ordinary headache. It is the womb of a goddess pressing against the walls of his mind. The birth yet to come will make the titanomachi look like a dress rehearsal, and you can almost hear the faint, ringing hum of a hammer in the distance, waiting to split that storm wide open. The ache inside Zeus's skull refuses to fade. You imagine him on his newly won throne, lightning flickering like restless pets around his shoulders, trying to look composed while secretly grinding his teeth at the relentless pounding in his head. Kings aren't supposed to complain about headaches, right? Especially not gods who just toppled an entire generation of titans. But you see him pause mid-sentence, rubbing his temples like an overworked office manager staring at yet another endless spreadsheet. At first, Zeus convinces himself it's just battle fatigue. A decade of war can leave aftershocks in anyone's body. But the pressure grows sharper, like a living creature pressing against bone. And Zeus begins to realize this isn't something he can ignore. It is creation itself, demanding release. Historical fact. Ancient Greeks sometimes described headaches as divine punishment or possession. Because how else do you explain pain without MRIs or aspirin? In fact, one account links migraines directly to prophetic visions, as though pain were a doorway to the sacred. Quirky tidbit, later storytellers joke that Zeus must have been the first god to need a supernatural aspirin. Imagine being immortal and yet begging for someone to just invent ibuprofen already. Or maybe some ancient herbal tea. Crocodile dung sunscreen wouldn't help much here. Scholars still argue whether this myth reflects actual childbirth customs like the role of midwives and tools, or whether it's symbolic of thought itself being born. Is Athena the goddess of wisdom because she literally erupted from the head of the king of gods? Or was the image cooked up to impress students who thought philosophy was cooler than farming? You lean closer, watching Zeus finally stagger. His brothers and sisters exchange worried glances. This isn't just a headache. This is something monumental. And into this tense moment steps Hephaestus, the god who hasn't yet gained his full fame as smith and craftsman, but already carries a hammer with unsettling confidence. Picture him, limping slightly. Yes, myths describe his gait as uneven, eyes glinting with both curiosity and a hint of mischief. He hears Zeus groan, sees the sparks flickering erratically from his brow, and thinks, maybe the king of gods just needs a little blacksmithing to the face. Hold still, Hephaestus mutters, probably with the same tone you'd use before trying to fix your Wi-Fi router with a sharp tap. He lifts his hammer, forged to split rock and shape metal, and aims it not at an anvil, but at Zeus's forehead. The other gods gasp, but Zeus, desperate, sweating, trembling under the pressure, nods. You wince, bracing yourself, and then crack. The sound echoes like the first lightning strike of a storm. A fissure splits Zeus's brow, glowing with unbearable light. You expect blood, but instead something stranger, cleaner, sharper bursts forth. And in that blinding instant, the goddess you've been waiting for finally arrives. The hammer strike lingers in the air, ringing like a bell that shakes the bones of the cosmos. Zeus reels back, eyes flashing, and from the fissure in his forehead bursts not a cry. Not a mess of flesh, but a full-grown goddess wrapped in brilliance. You watch, stunned, as Athena steps forward. Armored, radiant. Her helmet gleams as if it were forged from thought itself. A spear rests in her hand, balanced as though she's been practicing for eternity. A shield, polished and unyielding, glimmers at her side. She is no fragile child. She is born in full command of herself. Imagine skipping childhood, adolescence, and awkward teen years and starting life already smarter than your parents. That's Athena for you. Zeus staggers but steadies, relief washing over him. The ache vanishes, replaced by awe at what he has just unleashed. Round him, the other Olympians stand in stunned silence. Even Poseidon, usually brash, pauses with his trident half-raised. Hera arches a brow, perhaps already calculating what this new presence means for family politics. Historical fact: Athena's birth from Zeus's head is one of the most iconic episodes. In Greek mythology, celebrated in vase paintings, temple carvings, and festival songs. Athenians in particular adored retelling it. They practically made it their city's marketing campaign. Quirky tidbit: some versions of the myth swap in Prometheus or even Hermes as the hammer wielder. Instead of Hephaestus, apparently everyone wanted the bragging rights of giving Zeus a divine head crack. Imagine the godly squabbles. No, **** split dad's skull. Not you. Scholars still argue whether Athena's birth is purely symbolic, a metaphor for wisdom, springing from the mind, or whether it preserves echoes of earlier goddesses absorbed into Olympian myth. Some suggest she once belonged to an older matriarchal cult, absorbed into Zeus's narrative so he could claim credit for her. Power politics, divine edition. But here she is, undeniable. Athena doesn't stumble. She doesn't cry. She simply looks around, her eyes sharper than lightning, and takes in the world. She nods to Zeus, who exhales in relief, perhaps thinking, at least the prophecy didn't end with my head exploding. You drift closer to Athena and notice how she carries herself. Calm, measured, precise. Unlike ours, who embodies raw aggression, Athena's warrior spirit feels deliberate, almost mathematical. She doesn't fight for rage, she fights for order. You can already sense why cities, not just battlefields, will worship her. The other gods murmur, uneasy yet intrigued. Something has shifted in Olympus. A goddess has been born in a way no other has sprung from. Intellect, not womb or chaos. The cycle of father against child may not be broken, but it has been reframed. And you, tucked into your pillow, realize the story has only just sharpened into clarity. The Titans may have fallen, but now a new force walks the earth, and the sound of her first footsteps is as steady as the beating of your slowing heart. The air still trembles from Athena's arrival, as if the cosmos hasn't yet decided how to process what just happened. You blink, expecting the thunder to fade, but instead a strange stillness hangs over Olympus. It isn't the awkward silence after an argument, it's the hush of everyone realizing history has just split down the middle. Athena stands tall, her armor shining with an almost unreal polish. No one handed her a training spear or a shield. She was born already knowing how to wield them. Her first step is measured, deliberate, the ground echoing softly as if it too is listening. You sense no wild fury in her stride. Instead, there's calculation, an elegance that feels both human and inhuman at once. Zeus exhales, rubbing his brow with visible relief, half laughing at the absurdity of what's just occurred. One moment he had the worst headache in divine history. The next he's staring at a daughter so perfectly formed she looks as though she's always existed. The gods gather closer, each one trying to understand this new force in their midst. Historical fact: Athenians often depicted this exact moment on their art, especially on the Parthenon's east pediment. Imagine entire marble sculptures frozen in that instant, Zeus seated, head split, Athena leaping forth, every line of stone radiating. Or, for them, this wasn't just mythology. It was their origin story as a people. Quirky tidbit: some later playwrights poked fun at Athena's unusual birth, joking that she skipped the diaper stage entirely. Picture a newborn immediately asking for a library card, full suit of armor, and maybe a nice apartment downtown. Talk about raising the bar for siblings. And of course, scholars still argue whether Athena's armor debut was meant literally or symbolically. Did the Greeks believe she actually popped out combat ready? Or was it just shorthand for saying wisdom arrives fully formed, no training wheels needed? The debate remains a cozy battleground in classical studies. But you don't need the scholars now. You can see her yourself, walking calmly across Olympus, eyes bright as dawn. She scans her divine siblings not with rivalry, but with curiosity. Poseidon shifts uncomfortably, trident tapping against the ground. Hera folds her arms, her expression unreadable. Hades lingers in the shadows, watching quietly. Each god senses something new. Athena isn't here to overthrow, but her presence inevitably rearranges the balance. Zeus smiles, maybe for the first time in days without wincing. The prophecy has not destroyed him, it has, instead, produced an ally. He sees in Athena not just a daughter, but a mind sharp enough to steady his reign. Perhaps he thinks the curse of Cronus has been rewritten, bent into something survivable. You, hovering at the edge of the scene, notice how Athena's voice finally cuts through the quiet. Calm, level, resonant. She doesn't shout or boast. She simply states that she is here, ready to serve wisdom, ready to bring order, ready to balance might with thought. It's less a declaration and more like the universe itself, finally introducing the missing piece of a puzzle. The Olympians shift, still wary but slowly nodding. The world has changed. The storm inside Zeus has become a goddess outside him, and as her first words settle into the air, you feel the soft pull of sleep deepen, like her presence alone is steadying the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You linger on Olympus as the gods adjust to this new arrival, watching their eyes follow Athena like children watching a comet blaze across the sky. She doesn't stumble or hesitate, not once. She simply moves with a certainty that makes even her elders pause. It's as if the rules of divine family drama no longer apply to her. No childhood tantrums, no squabbles over toys, no uncertain footing. She is complete, and the completeness itself is unsettling. Zeus studies her the longest. Perhaps he wonders if she is the loophole in his father's curse. Perhaps he sees her as a reflection of himself, only sharpened. Or maybe he's just grateful the pressure in his head is gone. Whatever he feels, you sense an unspoken bond settling between father and daughter, an alliance born of both relief and admiration. Historical fact: Athena quickly became central to Greek identity, especially in Athens, the city named after her. Citizens built the Parthenon not just as a temple, but as a civic symbol, housing a massive statue of her made of ivory and gold. For them, she wasn't distant, she was their guardian. Quirky tidbit: in some versions of the story, Athena's shield, the Aegis, is described as having the head of the Gorgon Medusa sewn onto it. Imagine wearing your enemy's face as a kind of cosmic do not disturb sign. It's the mythological version of slapping a scary sticker on your laptop so nobody steals it. And here's the debate. Historians still argue whether Athena was always meant to be Zeus's loyal ally, or whether older myths hinted she might once have rivaled him. Did the Greeks soften her into a cooperative daughter because it suited their politics? Or was her wisdom always paired with loyalty? The question hovers, never quite resolved. Meanwhile, Athena herself observes her siblings. Poseidon, restless, mutters something about seas and storms, but you notice the spark of rivalry already flickering in his eyes. Hera watches coolly, aware that another powerful goddess in the family will shift the household politics. Demeter nods with a kind of approval, seeing in Athena a protector of crops and cities alike. Hestia simply smiles, preferring the warmth of the hearth over arguments. Athena, for her part, neither challenges nor flatters them. She simply claims her place. She stands beside Zeus, not beneath him, her armor catching the faint glow of dawn rising over Olympus. And as she does, you sense the world itself settling into a new rhythm, as though balance has finally been restored after generations of upheaval. You take in the quiet that follows. The hammer has struck, the prophecy has twisted, and the new goddess now breathes calmly under the wide Olympian sky. And as you exhale with her, eyelids heavy, you realize the story is far from over. It's only found its center. Time stretches the way it always does after storms, slow and steady, letting everyone relearn what peace feels like. You watch the gods settle into their realms, Poseidon slipping back into the sea, Hades fading to the underworld, Hera ranging her place beside Zeus, Demeter tending the fertile earth. And yet, in Olympus, something new hums in the air. Athena. She walks the marble halls as though she's always belonged, each step crisp, her armor whispering faintly. She doesn't swagger or boast, but her presence alone changes the atmosphere. The other gods sense it. Mortals, though they can't see her yet, will soon feel it in their bones too, when wisdom seeps into their stories, when strategy whispers into their battles, when cities find their rhythm. Zeus notices it first. He realizes Athena isn't just another child. She is the kind of ally who makes kingship stable. Where Mars lunges into fights with reckless abandon, Athena plans. Where Hermes schemes with quicksilver wit, Athena deliberates. Where Hera guards marriage and family with fire, Athena steadies politics and civic life. She doesn't just represent wisdom, she embodies the glue that keeps civilization from unraveling. Historical fact: Athena's cult grew rapidly in Athens, with the Panathenaic festival celebrated every 4 years in her honor. It was more than religious devotion, it was civic pride, reinforcing her as both protector and symbol of unity. Quirky tidbit: some sources claim Athena invented the flute, only to toss it away after realizing it puffed up her cheeks when she played. Imagine the goddess of wisdom rejecting an instrument because she didn't like how it messed with her selfie profile. Mortal musicians scrambled to pick it up anyway, thrilled to use anything the goddess had touched. And yes, scholars still argue whether Athena's wisdom was meant as philosophical thought or practical know-how. Was she the goddess of abstract ideals, or the one who showed people how to build ships, weave cloth, and organize armies? The answer may be both, but debates continue, often as heated as any battlefield. Back in Olympus, the gods exchange wary glances. Athena has carved out space not by demanding it, but by simply existing with such authority that no one can deny her. She speaks calmly, her tone measured, offering counsel without arrogance. Zeus leans on her words already, weighing them more heavily than the thunder that rolls in his own chest. For you, watching from the edge of this myth, there's a sense of balance finally settling. Not the silence of exhaustion, like after the Titanomachy, but the equilibrium of a puzzle piece clicking into place. Athena's birth hasn't shattered the order, it's stitched it together. You feel your breath slowing with the rhythm of hers, the hush of Olympus sinking deeper into your own chest. And though the gods know challenges still wait monsters, rivalries, endless human squabbles for this moment, Athena's presence is enough to steady the storm. Athena doesn't linger long in Olympus before the world itself begins to call her name. You follow her as she steps beyond the marble halls, her sandals touching the earth with a sound more like thought than footsteps. Mortals, still fumbling through the early stages of civilization, sense her presence in the sudden clarity of their ideas. It's as if a whisper tells them how to shape wood into ships, how to guide a plow, how to see patterns where before there was only chaos. She is not like the other gods who descend in a storm or a blaze. Athena arrives quietly, her armor gleaming not to frighten but to reassure. Villagers look up at the sky and feel less alone. Fields yield better harvests, not because she waves her hand, but because she teaches farmers how to read the soil. Warriors lift their spears with steadier hands, not because she fights for them, but because she lends them strategy. Historical fact: Athenians believed Athena gifted them the olive tree, symbolizing peace, prosperity, and sustenance. The tree became so central to their identity that it adorned their coins and their myths alike. Quirky tidbit: one odd version of the myth claims that when Athena planted the first olive tree, Poseidon sulked and flooded the spot with salt water just to be petty. Imagine losing a competition and responding with, "Fine, I'll make your lawn undrinkable forever." Classic sipping energy. And scholars still argue whether Athena's role as a bringer of skills like weaving, metalwork, and navigation means she was once a more domestic goddess later rebranded as warrior, or whether she always carried both faces at once. Is she craftsperson or commander, or simply the reminder that wisdom must be useful to survive? You drift alongside her as she guides mortals. A woman learns to weave tighter patterns. A sailor notices the stars guiding his ship. A farmer digs a little deeper, planting in rows that make the soil breathe better. None of them see Athena directly, but they all feel her hand in their decisions. Unlike Zeus's thunderbolts or Poseidon's waves, Athena doesn't leave scars, she leaves systems. Back on Olympus, Zeus watches her with approval. He knows she makes his rule steadier, because a world of thoughtful people is less likely to spiral into constant chaos. But Poseidon mutters still, trident scratching at the ground. His gift to mortals' saltwater springs has been ignored in favor of Athena's olive tree. Rivalry brews, soft but undeniable. And you, tucked warmly under your blanket, feel the shape of the story expand. Athena is no longer just a daughter born of thunder. She is becoming a bridge between divine and mortal. Her quiet wisdom a thread weaving across both realms. The storm is past, but her influence is only beginning to ripple outward. Like calm waves spreading from a single stone, the rivalry between Athena and Poseidon sharpens, and you can almost hear it like the crackle of distant thunder. Their contest for the heart of a city later to be called Athens unfolds in a story that mortals would tell for centuries. Both gods stand upon the Acropolis, looking down at a cluster of homes and fields. The people wait nervously, knowing the favor of one god could shape their future forever. Poseidon slams his trident into the rock, and from the stone bursts a spring of water. The crowd cheers until they taste it and discover it is salt, undrinkable. A gift more of pride than practicality. Athena steps forward. She kneels and presses her spear into the earth. From the soil rises an olive tree, slender and green. It promises food, oil, wood sustenance that will last generations. The people rejoice. They choose Athena, and in that moment, Athens is born. Historical note: archaeologists still point to the sacred olive tree near the Erechtheian temple on the Acropolis, said to descend from that mythical first gift. Even when invaders burned Athens, stories tell that the olive tree sprouted again the very next day. A living emblem of resilience. Quirky tidbit: in one comedic version of the myth, mortals were less noble in their decision-making. Supposedly, the women of Athens loved Athena's gift, while the men preferred Poseidon's showy power. When women's votes tipped the scale in Athena's favor, the men retaliated by banning women from politics forever after. Greek myths, equal parts epic and petty. Athena's calm victory deepens her reputation. She is not only wise, but she wins by giving, not through intimidation, not through destruction. Her olive tree is quiet, unassuming, but more powerful than Poseidon's roaring waves. You notice how her myth always bends toward usefulness, to tools that can be held in mortal hands. Where others flex divine might, Athena shapes human progress. Her wisdom is practical, not abstract. It feeds bellies, oils lamps, strengthens ships, and comforts weary bodies at night. And so the city takes her name. Athens, the jewel of Greece, where art and philosophy will flourish, guided by the goddess whose helmet glitters not in wrath, but in clarity. From your bed, the room seems quieter. You feel the echo of that olive tree, sturdy, enduring, whispering peace instead of conquest. Athena has carved her place not with thunder, not with floods, but with patience. The rivalry with Poseidon lingers, yes, but the people's choice is clear. Athens belongs to wisdom. Athens now breathes under Athena's protection, and you feel yourself strolling its streets as though you've been folded into a sun-washed dream. Marble columns gleam against the sky, temples hum with incense, and in shaded courtyards, citizens whisper stories of their patron goddess. Her presence is everywhere, etched into statues, stitched into cloaks, carved onto coins. You sense her like a quiet hum beneath the city's daily rhythm. But mortals do not merely receive from the gods. They give back. Festivals arise, the greatest of which is the Panathenaea. Imagine it every few years, a procession winds up to the Acropolis, weaving through the city's arteries like a glowing thread. Citizens carry a grand new robe, a peplos, woven for Athena herself. The garment is embroidered with scenes of gods defeating giants, a reminder that order and wisdom always triumph over chaos. Historical fact, the Panathenaea was so central to Athenian life that even prisoners were sometimes released temporarily to take part. It was both a religious celebration and a unifying civic ritual. Drawing the city together under the eyes of their goddess daughters, the festival unfolds. Music fills the air. Flutes trill, lyres strum, drums beat softly like a city's heartbeat. You picture the torches of night races blazing against the dark, runners gasping as they pass flame to flame. Winners earn amphorae filled with olive oil, yes, from Athena's sacred tree prizes that were as practical as they were symbolic. Quirky tidbit, scholars have uncovered amphorae with prize oil still inside. More than 2,000 years old. It's probably not the salad dressing you'd want to drizzle on tonight's dinner, but imagine the astonishment of finding Athena's gift preserved in clay through centuries of silence. And then there are the game's athletics. Poetry, music, all woven into the festival's pulse. You imagine sitting among the Athenians, fanning yourself with a palm leaf, cheering as young men wrestle in the dust. Even here, Athena's wisdom shows itself, contests not of mindless brawling, but of skill, artistry, and endurance. Historians still argue whether the Panathenaea's grandeur grew as propaganda tool of Athenian politics or whether it genuinely remained rooted in reverence. Was the city using Athena's name to polish its own power, or was its devotion as pure as the threads of her robe? The debate lingers like incense that refuses to fade at night. When the sacred peplos is finally lifted into Athena's temple, the city exhales. Lamps flicker, bread is shared, wine is poured. The people feel safe beneath her bronze gaze, confident that their goddess favors them above all others. As you drift in your own space. Far from Athens, you still sense the faint rustle of fabric, the sway of torches, the echo of hymns sung in her honor. Athena, though immortal, is nourished by mortal devotion. Your eyelids grow heavy just imagining how she must stand silently in her temple, bathed in moonlight, her wisdom anchoring an entire city to the earth. Night deepens over Athens. Yet Athena's story is far from quiet. Whispers drift of a darker thread in her myth, one where devotion twists into cruelty. You find yourself tiptoeing through a shadowed workshop, where a young woman named Arachne sits at her loom, threads dancing under her fingers like sunbeams caught in spider silk. Her tapestries are dazzling, so lifelike they almost move. And soon mortals murmur that her skill even surpasses the goddess herself. Athena hears the rumors. Gods, after all, are not fond of being overshadowed by humans. She arrives disguised as an old woman, warning Arachne that humility would serve her better than pride. But Arachne laughs, confident, sharp-tongued. She challenges Athena outright. Asterisk, let us weave, and let the truth decide. Asterisk, and so they do. Athena unveils scenes of the gods in all their glory, thrones and victories and power beyond mortal reach. Arachne, however, dares to weave the gods' failings, Zeus's escapades, their jealousies, their pettiness. Her work is flawless, brutally honest, and it stings. Historical fact, the myth of Arachne is one of the earliest cautionary tales about hubris excessive. Pride and the Greeks folded it into their cultural DNA in tragedies. Hubris nearly always invited ruin, whether in kings or commoners. The ending is cruel. Athena cannot fault the quality of Arachne's tapestry, but enraged at her audacity, she tears it to pieces. Overcome with despair, Arachne hangs herself. Athena relents just enough to transform her into a spider, condemned to weave forever. Quirky tidbit, the word arachnid. that scientists use today for spiders traces directly back to this myth. So, yes, every time you sweep away a cobweb, you're brushing aside echoes of an ancient grudge match. Historians still argue whether the story casts Athena as a fair enforcer of divine order, or as a jealous goddess punishing a gifted mortal unjustly. Is she protector of cosmic balance or just another insecure deity with a fragile ego? The debate webs itself into scholarly circles like the very silk threads of Arachne's loom. You pause, thinking how unsettling it feels to see wisdom blur into wrath. Athena, usually the beacon of reason, reveals a streak of cruelty when provoked. Perhaps that is the caution wisdom without compassion can cut as deep as ignorance in your own room. You glance at the ceiling's shadows. They stretch like delicate strands, almost web-like, and for a moment you imagine Arachne up there, still weaving, still suspended between brilliance and punishment. Sleep curls around you like a thread, binding gently, reminding you that stories do not always soothe, they also warn. Your journey through Athena's myths leads you into the clang of bronze and the dust of battlefields, where her wisdom no longer threads through looms or olive groves, but shines on the sharpened edge of war. Unlike ours, who revels in chaos and bloodlust, Athena represents strategy, the calm chess player moving pieces long before swords ever clash. You picture yourself standing at the walls of Troy, the wind whips your cloak, and distant cries rise from the plain. Here, Athena shapes destiny with a cool, calculating hand. She favors the Greeks, whispering counsel into their ears, guiding Odysseus with clever tricks and steadying Achilles when rage threatens to blind him. Historical fact, in Homer's *Iliad*, Athena intervenes at key moments such as when she lures Hector into facing Achilles, sealing the fate of Troy's greatest defender. To the Greeks, her presence in war underscored that victory wasn't won by brute strength alone, but by discipline and foresight. Yet the gods are fickle. Athena's loyalties sometimes shift, her patience strained by mortal arrogance. You remember Ajax the Lesser, who dragged a Trojan priestess from Athena's temple after the city fell. Outraged by the violation, Athena sent storms to destroy much of the Greek fleet on their voyage home. Even her favorites are not immune when they cross the line. Quirky tidbit, ancient Greek soldiers sometimes carved tiny owls onto their shields, a wink to Athena's sacred bird, believing the goddess's watchful eyes would double their own in combat. Picture a battlefield shimmering with hundreds of owl eyes, like a parliament of birds swooping silently through. Chaos. Historians still argue whether Athena's role in war reflects the Greeks' attempt to rationalize violence wrapping brutality in the noble cloak of strategy, or whether she truly symbolized a higher principle that elevated battle beyond slaughter. Was she a moral compass in war, or just another excuse for conquest? Her name becomes a chant on the lips of warriors, not the scream of frenzy, but a steady hum, a mantra of precision. Even now, you hear it like a low drumbeat beneath your breathing, from your own quiet space. The clash of bronze feels distant, softened into a faint echo. You imagine Athena not standing in the gore-slick mud beside ours, but perched above, guiding the currents of fate with a strategist's calm, making war less about carnage and more about pattern. Still, the truth lingers. Even wisdom, when wedded to war, leaves scars. The battlefield quiets, and from the dust you step into halls where Athena is not a warrior, but a patron of minds and makers. In Athens, she is honored not just with spears and shields, but with chisels, scrolls, and clay. Her wisdom flows into art, philosophy, and invention, shaping the city into a beacon that still dazzles the modern world. You wander through the Agora, the bustling marketplace of Athens. Merchants call out, selling figs and fish, but amid the noise, you notice philosophers gathering in shaded corners. Here, Socrates pauses mid-stride, asking questions that unravel assumptions. Plato scribbles notes, weaving ideas into dialogues that will echo through centuries. These thinkers praise Athena not as a distant deity, but as the living soul of their city. Historical fact, the Parthenon, Athena's great temple on the Acropolis, was more than a place of worship. It stored the city's wealth, symbolized Athenian power, and displayed the famous statue of Athena Parthenos, a colossal figure of gold and ivory crafted by the sculptor Phidias. Imagine standing before it, Athena towering, spear in hand, a sphinx crowning her helmet, and at her feet, a small statue of Nike, the goddess of victory. Her very image fuses war, wisdom, and artistry. You feel small beneath her gaze, but also strangely steadied. Quirky tidbit: some historians believe the statue's gold plates were designed to be removable, in case the city needed to melt them down for emergency funds. So, yes, Athena herself doubled as a divine savings account. Athena's influence stretches beyond stone and ivory. Craftsmen invoke her when weaving cloth, sculptors when chiseling marble, even shipwrights when fitting timbers. She is wisdom embodied in practical skill. Historians still argue whether Athens' devotion to Athena was the cause of its golden age, or merely the mirror of it. Did the goddess inspire the city's genius, or did the city project its own brilliance onto her figure? The debate glimmers like sunlight on the Parthenon's steps, never resolved, but always a luring dot as you drift in your bed. You can almost hear hammers ringing in marble quarries, the scratch of styluses on wax tablets, the hum of voices debating in shaded colonnades. Athena's city is alive not only with soldiers, but with thinkers, builders, and dreamers. Her wisdom has slipped into the mortar of the world itself. And even as you lie here, centuries later, you rest within its glow dot, and now, at the end of this long path through myth and memory, you arrive where all stories eventually drift into reflection. Athena stands before you not as a single image, but as a mosaic, fragments glimmering from every tale. She is the warrior who fights with precision, the patron who nurtures invention, the goddess who can bless or punish with equal resolve. She is olive branches and bronze spears, our eyes in the dark, and the whisper of a loom. Her contradictions ripple like moonlight over water. In one breath, she is merciful, guiding heroes with a steady hand. In another, she is unyielding, turning rivals into spiders or striking fleets with storms. Perhaps that is why her myth has endured, because wisdom itself is never simple. It can comfort, but it can also cut. Historical fact: the Romans adopted her into their pantheon under the name Minerva, blending her with their own deities of craft and war. Through this, Athena's influence stretched beyond Greece, seeding into Europe's cultural foundations. Quirky tidbit: in some medieval manuscripts, scribes doodled tiny owls in the margins of texts as if invoking Athena, even though they were Christian monks living 1,000 years after her temples had crumbled. Old habits, it seems, die harder than marble. Historians still argue whether Athena was originally a local goddess of olive cultivation, later elevated by Athens, or whether she was always envisioned as a grand cosmic figure of wisdom. Was she born in the cracks of practical farming life, or in the thunderclap of divine imagination? The debate hums unresolved like cicadas at dusk, and you, lying here, feel the weight of her presence mellow into calm. The clang of Troy fades, the loom falls silent, the olive leaves stop rustling. Only the steady breath of night remains. Now the story softens, the pace loosens, as though the night itself is exhaling. You picture yourself back at the olive tree, its branches stretching gently, swaying without hurry in the warm air. The leaves glow silver under the moon, and you realize you have walked the entire arc of Athena's story, from the crack of Zeus's skull to the quiet entrance of her city. Each detail that once burned bright the contests, the festivals, the battles now feels distant, softened like carvings worn smooth by centuries of touch. What remains is a steady, reassuring presence, wisdom as something that holds, not something that shouts. You allow your mind to drift the way the Athenians must have at the end of their festivals, lying in shaded courtyards with the scent of olive oil in the air, feeling secure beneath their goddess's bronze gaze. That sense of safety trickles through you now. The world outside your room, with all its noise and clamor, recedes, leaving only this small sanctuary of quiet. Your body feels heavier, as if each muscle is exhaling. The tension of travel, even an imagined one, slips away. You are no longer standing on battlefields or in temple halls. You are simply here, surrounded by softness, with Athena's story folded neatly behind you like a book set gently on a nightstand. You think of her owl, wings tucked, eyes closing. The city sleeps, and so do you? Wisdom, after all, is not just about action, but about knowing when to rest, when to surrender to silence, and so, as the final echoes fade, you let the story dissolve completely. No sharp edges remain, only the slow rhythm of your breath, the comfort of the dark, and the promise that sleep will come. Good night.